Hey, what's going on? So today we're going to be talking all about Atomfall's brand new update 1.20, which also comes alongside the big Red Strain DLC. And honestly, there's a ton to unpack here because it's not just a few little tweaks or some boring bug fixes. This is one of those updates where you feel like the game has grown in scope and maturity. Like the developers went back into the world and really fine-tuned a bunch of details that make the whole experience smoother while also adding in new content that makes you want to jump back in even if you'd stepped away for a while. Now, I know some of you might be wondering what's actually new in this patch, what's been improved, and whether or not it's worth your time to reinstall or boot the game back up. So I'm going to take you through all of it in detail and give you my perspective on why these changes matter. And I'll be doing it in the same kind of way we talk if we were just hanging out and playing the game together. So don't expect some stiff, robotic patch note reading. We're just going to flow through this in a way that feels real. First things first, let's talk about the timing of this update. It dropped on September 16th, 2025, and that's kind of a perfect window because people were hungry for fresh content after exploring the base game. The developers knew that releasing a big content pack and a major patch at the same time would keep players engaged. And honestly, that strategy worked because everyone's talking about it again. The centerpiece of this update is without a doubt the Red Strain DLC. This isn't just a new skin pack or some light add-on, it introduces a whole new area called Midsummer Island. And with that comes new leads to chase, new characters to meet, new enemies to fight, and new weapons and items to collect. What I like about this is that it expands the world in a way that feels organic, not just tacked on. If you're someone who was craving a reason to get back into Atomfall beyond cleaning up old quests or exploring the same spaces, this gives you that reason, and it feels substantial. Now, that's not to say it's all about flashy new content. One of the things I noticed right away while reading through the patch notes and then actually testing some of it in-game is how much attention they gave to fixing little immersion breaking issues. For example, quest notifications used to be one of those small annoyances that could break the flow because every time you unpause the game, you'd see the same notifications pop up again. That's been cleaned up now, which means when you're actually exploring, you're not constantly being reminded of the same objective over and over. It's a subtle change, but you'd be surprised how much it improves the rhythm of playing. And speaking of rhythm, enemy AI has also been improved. Before, there were times when enemies would awkwardly shift between combat and investigation states in ways that didn't feel natural. Now, the transition feels smoother, and that goes a long way toward making encounters more believable and less gamey. Another thing that stood out is how much attention they gave to NPC behavior and animations. I'm sure plenty of you noticed bandits doing weird things like sliding around with broken animations or not reacting properly to kicks. That's all been addressed. NPCs now face the right direction when they're running, which sounds like such a basic thing, but was oddly distracting before. And on top of that, melee combat feels more satisfying because when you kick an enemy or smack them with something heavy like a cricket bat or mace, you actually get a proper flinch response. Plus, there are now blood effects for some of those melee hits. That makes combat feel heavier, more visceral, and honestly more rewarding. It's the kind of thing you don't realize you were missing until it gets fixed, and suddenly everything feels more grounded. Inventory and interface improvements also got some love in this update, and that's something I think most players will appreciate because the menus were sometimes a little clunky. Equipped item icons now actually display correctly after transitions, like when you change areas, which again prevents those confusing moments where you thought you had something equipped, but visually it wasn't showing. Traders' inventories are easier to scroll through because the skipping issue has been fixed. And if you like to micromanage your gear, you'll be happy to know that the unequip option now properly works for things like the torch, the metal detector, and the signal redirector. These might sound like minor fixes, but anyone who's had to fight with clunky menu systems knows how much smoother the whole experience when this stuff just works the way it's supposed to. And while we're on the topic of systems, map functionality has been polished up as well. There were times before where switching regions would cause unnecessary refreshes, almost like the game was struggling to keep up with what you were selecting, but that's gone now. The Skills tab has also been corrected, making it much easier to navigate your character progression without second-guessing if the menus are glitching. What's cool is that these are the kinds of changes that show the developers are listening to players. They're not just adding flashy DLC and ignoring the base systems. They're actually cleaning house and making sure the foundation of the game feels solid. Quest and story fixes are another big area that got attention in this patch. For instance, cutscenes tied to Joyce Tanner and the Wicked Isle Poison Abbot head now trigger properly on PS4. That might seem like a platform-specific fix, but it's a good reminder that they're making sure the game runs consistently across all consoles. Another big one is the Escape with Captain Sims quest, where the exfil camp would sometimes incorrectly become hostile. That's the kind of bug that can completely derail a playthrough, so fixing it is huge. Dr. Garrow's behavior was also fixed. She used to stay hostile if you accidentally shot her in her cell, even if you eventually freed her, which was frustrating because it punished you for something small. Now she reacts logically, which makes sense for both the story and player choice. And there are other subtle story adjustments, like Pamela Shaw's dialogue updating correctly after solving her murder, or Bill Anderson now responding properly after certain interactions. These may seem like small details, but together they tighten up the narrative experience so the world feels more reactive and less broken. Another detail I really appreciate is the way item logic has been smoothed out. Before, important quest items could vanish if your inventory was full at the time you picked them up, which is a nightmare scenario for anyone who's ever had to reload hours back because of one oversight. Now the game prevents that from happening, which is exactly how it should be. They even went back and filled in item descriptions, like completing the ritual dagger's description so it no longer feels half finished. It's little touches like this that show the developers actually care about polish, not just content. Of course, locations also saw a ton of fixes. And if you've played Atomfall for any significant amount of time, you know there were plenty of oddities scattered around the world. Slatin Dales had floating torches and texture issues. Wyndham Village had weird hostility triggers where villagers would suddenly attack you for no reason. And Casterfell Woods had misplaced items like the atomic battery and even missing objects like the storage junction box. All of that has been addressed. Even the Windscale plant got fixes for platform behavior and AI following properly. And the Interchange's medical lab had issues that are now smoothed out. The most impressive part is that the new Midsummer Isle location also got a ton of early polish, with fixes to floating foliage, clipping NPCs, falling through maps, and misaligned textures. That's especially nice because it means the DLC isn't launching in a messy state. It's being released alongside a patch that makes sure it actually feels playable right away. One thing I want to highlight is how combat feels different after this update. It's not like they completely overhauled the system, but between the melee improvements, the AI tweaks, and the way enemies now escalate aggression properly when you're strafing around them, fights feel more engaging. Protocol soldiers, for example, now take cover indoors, which is such a small change, but makes them feel like actual trained enemies instead of just targets running in circles. And the addition of spore mines, being detectable before they unfurl, adds another layer of strategy, especially if you've invested in prescience or attunement. Those abilities now feel more rewarding because they actually give you a practical advantage rather than just existing for flavor. I think what excites me the most about this update is how it balances content and quality of life. A lot of times when games release DLC, they put so much focus on the new stuff that they forget to fix the old, leaving you with a weird imbalance where the base game still feels clunky even though the new expansion is polished. Atomfall Update 1.20 doesn't fall into that trap. Instead, it feels like they're elevating the entire game at once. If you're a returning player, you're going to notice that the little frustrations you used to deal with are suddenly gone.